I'm so excited because I'm about to prune my pomegranate tree, and this is the first time that I will have pruned it because I just planted it last spring, and I'm really excited to see it cleaned up before the growing season starts. So in this video, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been learning about pruning pomegranate trees so you could see what I did to set up my tree for growing and fruiting this season. The first thing about pruning pomegranate trees that you need to know is the fact that you don't absolutely have to do it. If you decide not to prune your pomegranate tree, it's just fine. The tree will continue to grow happily. It will probably even fruit happily. But there are some good reasons to consider pruning. So let me share with you why I'm pruning to see if it makes sense to you. So first of all, it's about maintaining the size and shape of the tree. Pomegranate trees, especially in a really hot climate like mine, they can grow really big depending on what variety you're growing. So this is a wonderful pomegranate, and it could grow 15 plus feet tall if I let it just do its thing, and I'm sure it would be lovely. But I don't really want to climb up that high to try to risk my neck and pick some pomegranates. So I want to control the size of the tree. The other thing is that pomegranates tend to grow in a more shrubby form. And that's one of the reasons they make such great landscape plants, is because they're kind of a cross between a shrub and a tree. Now I want mine to become more of a multi-stemmed tree, so kind of that in-between place. It's related to like a crepe myrtle, for example. Often you've seen grown this way. And if I prune it that way, it's actually going to help with its fruiting. It's going to keep the fruit not only a little closer to the ground and easier to reach, but it may actually fruit more, and the fruit will probably be of higher quality because the tree will have less growth to support and more energy to put towards fruiting. Another reason I plan to prune is to help manage the disease pressure that I find in my area. This may not be true for you. You may be blessed to live in an area that doesn't have the crazy bugs and humidity and heat and everything that I have, but it's a big thing here. So it's really important to me to open up the center of the tree, allow air to flow through, and just help keep that disease pressure as controlled as possible. Another thing is kind of goes along the same lines, is in opening up the tree and thinning out some of the dense growth. That's also going to help light to reach more of the tree. And light is of course what makes photosynthesis happen, and it's also what helps the fruit themselves to develop more sugars. More sugars means better flavor. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on the idea of, can light get to all the different parts of the tree as I prune? The other reason I'm going to continue pruning this tree is to help refresh the fruiting wood as the tree gets older. This is less of a concern now because the tree is still really young. I just planted it last spring. But as the tree gets older, as it grows, it sends out new fruiting shoots from the base, and it's also going to send out new growth from the ends of these branches. And most of the fruiting will happen on that new growth that is coming out of 2 to 3 year old branches. So I'm trying to maintain a balance of old and new wood on the tree. The best time to prune a pomegranate tree is pretty much the same as every other fruit tree, that little window between the end of winter and early spring before the tree starts to grow. So your ideal time is after your average last frost date, but before the tree begins to bloom and grow for the season. Luckily with pomegranate trees, they do tend to bloom a little bit later in spring, usually mid-spring, as opposed to something like peaches or apricots that often bloom really early in spring and can get caught in those late frosts. So try to wait for as late in the winter as possible to prune. If you prune too early in the winter, it actually sort of signals to the tree that it's time to start growing again. So as soon as the temperatures warm up, it's going to begin to grow and bloom a little bit sooner, which again makes you susceptible to those late frosts. So wait till the end of winter, early spring to prune. The amount of pruning you need to do is going to vary pretty widely depending on, well, first of all, your climate. So again, in a warmer climate, it's going to grow a lot more vigorously than if your temperatures tend to stay more moderate and you live in a cooler climate. So the climate, the type of pomegranate you're growing, there's a pretty big range of sizes and vigor of the different trees that you grow. So that's going to change how much you prune. And then also the tree age. A younger tree is going to grow a lot more vigorously as it tries to establish a canopy so that it can support fruit later. As the tree ages, it'll slow down and you'll find yourself pruning less and less every year. When you first plant a pomegranate tree, you basically want to leave it alone its first year. So when you get the tree from the nursery or whatever, often they'll come kind of pre-pruned to an appropriate size. But if it's a little bit too big, when you're planting the tree, it's a good idea to chop it down to about 3 feet. So that way it has a chance to establish a good root system. And then leave it alone for the rest of that growing season until the tree is dormant. So that's the point that I'm at right now. I planted this tree last spring. It grew all throughout the season, and now here it is, it's in February, and I can tell that the buds are just starting to wake up as we've had some really mild weather. So I know now is my time to prune, to kind of establish the shape of this young tree. This is probably going to be the biggest pruning that I ever have to do for this tree since it's the first time. So I think it's time to do this. Okay, so I've got my gloves on. I also recommend some long sleeves because there's some pretty bad thorns on a pomegranate tree. So beware, be very careful. I've got my sharp, sanitized pruning shears, and I've got my loppers over there. So the first step, and again, this is for especially this first year of pruning. The first thing you want to do is choose 3 to 6, maybe at the most, strong scaffold branches. So these are the shoots that are coming up from the base of the plant. You want to pick ones that are strong. You want to hopefully pick ones that are kind of evenly spaced, because again, we're trying to just make sure that airflow and light can get all throughout the plant. Anything you don't want to keep, go ahead and trim all the way down to the ground. And this is really the one step that you can keep your eye on throughout the whole growing season. If you see any new shoots coming up from the base of the plant anytime during the growing season, go ahead and trim them down to the ground, unless for some reason you've decided to keep them. The only reason I would keep one of those new shoots that comes up in the growing season is if I wanted to refresh the old wood, kind of like I mentioned before. If you notice that one of these branches, like the fruit quality is going down and it's kind of slowing down a bit, then at the end of the season you can cut it down to the ground and let a new shoot come up and replace it. But for now, at the beginning here, my main goal is to just pick my hero scaffold branches and trim everything else down to the ground. Got just a couple small ones growing from the base here. It is a touch crowded, but that's just sort of how the plant came to me. And I feel like if I cut one of these, I'm gonna lose half my tree. So I think I'll go ahead and keep 1, 2, 3, and I'll keep this one, but I'm gonna get rid of, I think, this little side arm here. I think that's what I wanna do. So while I'm at it, I'm also going to trim away a lot of these really low growing branches that are growing off of the main scaffolds, because again, I want to keep this more open and keep the growth starting up a little bit higher on the tree. Can I also recommend that you wear some sort of eye protection, even if it's sunglasses, because this thing really wants to poke me in the eye. It's important to get rid of these low branches because pomegranates, as they grow, are really heavy. They take a long time to mature, 6, 7 months, sometimes more. And so they can really weigh down the branches of the tree. So if a pomegranate grows too close to the ground, it's just gonna sit on the ground, which of course is gonna make bugs and other critters eat it. It could rot in the rain or whatever. So keep the growth a little bit higher on the tree. Okay, it's already a big improvement just getting rid of all that stuff down at the bottom. So the next step is to go through and look for branches that are growing into the middle of the tree, look for areas where it's particularly crowded or where there's a lot of crossing branches. And the whole time I'm pruning, I'm gonna keep stepping back and just looking at the overall shape. I want it to open up, I want it to spread as much as possible. This tree is already growing kind of straight up and down, so I wanna do what I can to encourage that spreading. Okay, I'm gonna start with some of this stuff in the middle. See, this branch is growing inward, it's crossing, it's doing all the things wrong, so it's gotta go. Same thing with this one. This is tricky because I feel like the way this tree is sort of naturally wanting to grow is just very congested, and I don't want to overly prune, but I also want to make sure I'm setting it up to do the best it can in the future. So if you look, there's this big branch growing in the middle here that I'm considering getting rid of because it's right in the middle, and up here it just gets super crowded. And then also I've got this branch growing, which is kind of crossing through my other scaffolds and just sort of hanging out here on its own. And so I'm considering pruning that. But on the other hand, if I get rid of this whole branch, everything else is very kind of column-like and isn't spreading as much. But I still think it might be the best thing to do. So I thinned it out quite a bit. I had some tough decisions to make, but so far I'm really happy with how it's looking. The last step is just to tip prune these very, very long branches. I don't want to go crazy with this, but I do want to control the height of the tree and try to get it to just branch out a little bit more. So I'm just going to take the top longest branches and cut them back by about a third. When you do this, if your goal is to get the tree to branch out more, as I go through, I'm looking for where the buds are. And basically, when you find a bud, whatever direction it's pointing, that's the direction the next branch is going to grow. So that helps me determine exactly where I'm cutting above each bud. So now hopefully this branch will go this way. All right, so I think I'm happy with that. I actually have thinned it out quite a bit, as you can see, but there's still plenty left. I mean, there's tons of stuff on the ground here. I removed a lot, but I'm really happy with some of those tricky decisions I had to make early on. I think it was the right call, because I can just tell the airflow is much better, the form looks much better. And as I went along, I made sure to circle the tree and look at it from every point of view to make sure I was happy with how it was looking and how the form was looking. And I did tip prune those really, really long branches up at the top. So I'm really happy. So let me know how you think I did, especially if you have experience growing pomegranates, if you've pruned your own pomegranate trees. I'd love to get some feedback. Let me know if you have any tips or suggestions. I do want to point you to a resource I'm going to link to in the description, and I have an article on the Fruit Grove blog all about pomegranate pruning. It talks about all the steps that I took today, and also how to prune a young tree, a more mature tree that you want to reinvigorate, how to prune a potted pomegranate tree. All those details are on the blog post. So good luck pruning your own pomegranate tree. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.